Welcome to TG Talk, where we talk to the generation about reaching the world for Christ. Hello, I'm Bobby Bosler, and welcome back to another episode of TG Talk, where we have been looking at the book of Philippians. Now, young people, I find a lot of times when people think of the book of Philippians, all they think about is, oh yeah, I'm supposed to rejoice in the Lord. But I trust, as we have looked through this study, we've seen that this book is about so much more than just an attitude of rejoicing. There is a really practical, evangelistic passion that's threaded throughout these verses. For those of you that don't know, we've been studying from chapter 1, verse 12, all the way up to now we're going to be in chapter 2, verse 16 here at this time. If you'd like to get caught up, you can view this playlist right here, and this will show you all that you need to know, and you can get caught up with us here today. But essentially, the Reader's Digest version is Paul in confinement was seeing more fruit and more people in passion to preach the gospel than he had ever seen in his ministry. And in this moment of momentum, Paul was burdened and passionate that the Philippians, that they would live under obligation to the gospel, that they would not focus on themselves, but focus on the needs of others like Jesus did, and that in so focusing on others and not themselves, they wouldn't be bickering and fighting with each other and thus soiling their testimony, dimming their light, and dulling the opportunity that they had to reach the world for Christ. So when we get to verse 16 and Paul says, listen, as you do all this, hold forth the word of life. We must understand that, young people, the hope of this world is not a strong leader in the White House. The hope of this world is not a legislation bill that's passed through Congress. It is not a stimulus check. The hope of this world is not a powerful personality. It is Jesus as revealed by the Word of God. You see, in the Word we find life. And Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Young people, what your neighbors need is Jesus as revealed by the Word of God. And we must never forget our responsibility, whether we are in confinement or free as the Philippians. We must hold forth the word of life. But I want you to notice in this verse, he says, holding forth the word of life that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. What in the world is that all about? I thought he was telling the Philippians that they weren't supposed to murmur and fight and complain, that they were lights in this dark world, that they were to hold forth the word of God and see people saved and strive together for the faith of the gospel. I thought this was about the Philippians now. Now Paul's talking about himself. What's up with that? Well, you see, Paul's rejoicing in the day of Christ was directly tied to the performance and faith and success of his disciples. Paul was essentially saying, listen, I want you to know that how you respond to this challenge, to these words, to this letter is going to affect my rejoicing in heaven. In other words, if you do not follow my teaching, and by that he means if you do not live for others instead of yourself, if you do not faithfully preach the gospel, it's going to rain on my heavenly parade. Now, Paul wasn't just concerned about himself, but he was just saying, listen, I want you to understand, I'm investing in you. I have poured my life into you people. I have poured hours and hours and hours into instructing you and praying for you and training you. And I'm going to give an account for you one day. He says, listen, holding forth the word of life that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. Paul's race was intertwined with the race of the Philippians. His labor was intertwined in the labor of the Philippians. You see, if Paul completed his portion of the race, but the Philippians did not complete theirs, then he says, I will have run in vain. Young people, you need to understand that there are people investing in you every day of your life. There are people who are pouring their lives into you. They are praying for you. They are teaching you. They are instructing you. And sometimes it's so easy just to think my future's all about me. And this is just one more dimension to consider, that your future and your service for God is not all about you, because your service for God will affect your mentors. Let me put it to you this way. To put these verses in other words here, he says, extend the gospel message with unsoiled hands, so that I will have something to be proud about when we all stand before Christ, so that I can rejoice that I have indeed run to win, and that my hard work and sacrifice for you have not been in vain. You know, I know of many young people who've been in the best churches, under the best teaching, who've been under some of the most faith-filled, spirit-filled, godly men and women of God. And because they wanted to live their lives for themselves, they wasted all of that investment. They flushed it down the toilet. But I don't think I'm talking to young people who want to do that. I really don't. But I just want to urge you, listen, while you may not necessarily waste your entire life, you can waste your days and your minutes and your hours. I want to encourage you, don't waste a minute of your life. Don't waste an hour on some dumb video game that won't accomplish anything for eternity. Don't waste 2 hours on a movie that isn't going to help anybody get saved. Don't waste the time that God has given you to redeem. Because if you waste the sweat and tears of your mentors, you can't get that back. Young people, I want you to understand that I want my leaders and those that have loved and have prayed and have worked with me, I want, when they stand before God one day, I want for Jesus to say that their blood, sweat, and tears was a good investment in my case. Again, your life is not your own. Not only did Jesus invest his blood in you so that you can reach the world for Christ, but humans, people have also invested their lives in you. Take the football. Don't just catch it. As we said in a previous episode, take it to the 50-yard line, to the 30, to the 20, to the 10. Take it in that end zone and spike that pigskin. Listen, a lot has been given to you, and to whom much is given, much shall be required. Listen, in order to live our lives not for ourselves but for others, in order to take what we've been given and run it all the way to the end zone, that means we're going to have to sacrifice some things that we would prefer to do. And that means we're going to have to surrender. Surrender to the will of God and depend on his power to turn the world upside down for Jesus Christ. Thanks for watching.